From as early as I can remember, the world was divided into two parts, Nathan's and mine. His side sparkled with approval, gifts, and praise. Mine? Mine was dimly lit by silence, sharp remarks, and expectations I could never meet. My brother, Nathan, was 2 years older and somehow managed to be both a disaster and the pride of the family. He barely passed classes, forgot birthdays, talked back to teachers, but my parents? They worshipped the ground he walked on. Boys will be boys, they'd chuckle when he got in trouble for breaking a window or skipping class. Give him a break, Ash. He's just stressed, my mother would say when he shouted at her or slammed doors. If I so much as sighed too loudly. It was, don't be dramatic, or, why can't you be more like Nathan? It wasn't just words. It was how they showed love. When Nathan wanted a new phone? Done. A gaming console? Absolutely. Private guitar lessons, even though he quit after 3 weeks? Of course. When I needed new shoes for school? Your old ones are still wearable. When I asked for a ride to a debate competition? We're busy, ask a friend. It stung, more than I liked to admit. But the worst part wasn't even the absence of things. It was how I was constantly reminded that I didn't deserve them. Dad would glance at me over his newspaper and say, "You'll never be as charismatic as your brother. He just has that spark." Mom would sigh whenever I brought home awards and mutter, "All that studying and still no friends, huh?" They didn't see my exhaustion from working part-time jobs after school. They didn't ask how I was managing my mental health. They just assumed I was born to blend into the background. And the worst part? After a while, I started to believe them. If my life was a storm, then Grandma Ruth was the quiet shelter where I could breathe. She lived 7 hours away in a small house nestled in a sleepy town with cobbled streets and wildflowers growing on windowsills. My parents rarely took us there, claiming she was too critical or out of touch. But I adored her. When I was 13, she started writing to me. Real, handwritten letters, not texts or emails, but actual ink on paper. They arrived in pale blue envelopes with my name written in cursive. I treasured them. She asked about my life, but not in a generic "how's school?" kind of way. She asked what books I was reading, whether I still drew in my sketchpad, how I felt about growing up. Her words made me feel like I mattered. It was through those letters that I learned something strange. At 17, during my final year of high school, I wrote to her about how I was saving up for college entrance exams. She wrote back, "I'm glad you're planning ahead, darling. But surely your parents are using the monthly support I've been sending to help with your expenses? I've been wiring funds for both you and Nathan since you were 10. Every month. For books, classes, health, anything you needed." I remember reading that line at least 10 times. Funds? For both of us? I stared at her words like they were written in a foreign language. I had never seen a dime. No one had ever told me about this money. I always assumed we were tight on finances because Mom said things like, "We're not made of money," Ashley, whenever I asked for help with school costs. I didn't know what to do. A small part of me hoped there was a misunderstanding. So I asked. Carefully. One evening, I approached Mom as she folded laundry. "Hey, Grandma said she's been sending money for Nathan and me all these years. Is that true?" She stiffened. "I don't know what she's talking about. We've used some of it for household expenses. Don't go asking questions about things you don't understand." Then she walked away, and that was the end of that. But I understood enough. I understood that all those times they said they couldn't help me. They could have. They just chose not to. They took the money meant for both of us and funneled it all to Nathan, the golden child. I felt humiliated. Betrayed. But most of all, I felt stupid for ever thinking I was being paranoid. I kept Grandma's letter. Tucked it inside a book on my shelf. It became a reminder, not of betrayal, but of truth. That someone out there saw value in me. Believed in me enough to fight for my future. And someday, I'd show them all just how useless I wasn't. I started seeing it everywhere after that. Not the money that was long gone, but the choices. The subtle but constant reminders that Nathan mattered more. When his car broke down, Dad offered to lend him his own, no questions asked. When I asked if I could take driving lessons, "You're not responsible enough. What if you crash it?" When Nathan failed his first college semester, partying, skipping classes, generally being Nathan, they blamed the college for not understanding his potential. When I got accepted into an honors program at my community college while juggling part-time work, the response was, "Isn't that school kind of basic? Can't you aim higher?" Higher. With what money? By then, the truth Grandma had shared festered in the back of my mind like an open wound. Every time they said no to me, I thought of the money that could have said yes. I started testing them in small ways, just to see if I was wrong. I asked Dad for help paying for a certification course that could help me land a better part-time job. He scoffed. "Get your head out of the clouds, Ashley. You're not going to be some big shot. Just finish your classes, graduate, and we'll see." I didn't bother reminding him that I already was finishing classes. That I was on track to graduate with honors. That I was working 30 hours a week and pulling A's while Nathan still hadn't passed algebra. It was clear facts didn't matter in this house. Nathan was their investment. I was their afterthought. Mom even said it once, during a fight. "We only push you because you're not naturally gifted like your brother. You need it more." Gifted. He had literally been suspended twice. For fighting. Once for vandalizing a teacher's car. But somehow he still had potential and I needed to be pushed because my straight A's weren't enough. That was the night I realized something that changed everything. They needed me to be the failure. Because if I succeeded, they'd have to admit they were wrong. They'd have to face the fact that they bet everything on the wrong child. So I stopped fighting them. Not because I gave up, but because I was done playing defense. Instead, I started planning. Quietly. Carefully. It was a spring weekend when everything cracked open. Grandma Ruth had organized a family lunch, one of those bring everyone together afternoons she loved. It was rare. We hadn't had a full extended family gathering in years. She was turning 75, and she wanted it to be special. "Everyone should come," she said on the phone, "and Ashley, I expect you to bring that sketchbook I love. I want to show your cousins your talent." It was the first time someone had called me talented in a long, long while. When we arrived, the house was buzzing with relatives I barely remembered. My Uncle Tom and his always loud wife, their kids running around. Aunt Lena with her designer purse and practiced smiles. My cousins huddled around Grandma's porch swing. Nathan, of course, strutted in like he owned the place. He was already showing off a new watch, a birthday gift, he said, even though it wasn't his birthday. I caught Grandma looking at him with a tight-lipped expression. She said nothing at first. Just offered him tea. The meal was lively. At first. Until Grandma, spooning soup into her bowl, said lightly, "Nathan, how's college now? Still failing courses?" You could hear a pin drop. Nathan laughed awkwardly. "I'm taking a semester off, Grandma. You know, for my mental health." "Oh," she said, blinking. "So that's 5 semesters off in 3 years?" Dad cleared his throat. "Mom, maybe this isn't," but she wasn't done. "I just wanted to ask," she continued calmly, "what happened to all the money I sent for both kids? I assume it was used for Nathan's therapy and Ashley's books?" Mom stiffened. I froze. There it was laid bare on a table full of cousins, aunts, and uncles. "What money?" Aunt Lena asked. Grandma didn't flinch. I've been sending funds for both kids since they were 10. Every month. I specified it was to be split equally. Dad tried to laugh. We've used it as needed, Mom. For the house, groceries. Groceries? Grandma tilted her head. Because Ashley tells me she's been working nights to afford textbooks while Nathan's wearing a $300 watch. It was chaos after that. My uncles jumped in. Wait, you've been getting money all this time? My cousins stared wide-eyed. Nathan tried to storm off but tripped over the porch step. Mom cried. Dad tried to argue that they were just trying to do what's best. But Grandma didn't back down. I may be old, she said, but I'm not blind. Ashley, come sit next to me. I did. And that day, for the first time in my life, someone defended me in front of them. She turned to the whole family and said, Ashley is the reason I still send money. Because I see something in her, responsibility, resilience, heart. And I won't let it go to waste anymore. Then she handed me an envelope. Inside was a bank statement with an account in my name. And a deposit. Large enough to cover college, art school, and maybe even a little apartment. I've been saving a portion in case your parents did what I feared, she whispered. Now it's yours. Use it well. I cried in front of them all. But not from sadness. It was the moment I stopped being the family's disappointment. I was done being invisible. The silence in our car ride home was unbearable. Mom sat stiffly in the passenger seat, arms folded so tightly it looked painful. Dad gripped the wheel like it had wronged him personally. Nathan had his headphones in, clearly irritated he'd been exposed in front of the family. I sat in the back, quiet, but inside, I wasn't broken. For the first time, I felt powerful. They didn't yell at me that night. Not even the next day. Maybe they didn't know what to say. Or maybe, after being humiliated by Grandma in front of every branch of our family tree, they were too ashamed to speak. The silence stretched for days. But I noticed things change. For one, they stopped asking me for anything. No reminders to help clean the house. No thinly veiled guilt trips to stay home and help Nathan with his messes. It was like they suddenly remembered I wasn't their doormat, I was someone Grandma trusted over them. And they weren't wrong to be scared. Because while they sulked in their corners of the house, I opened my first independent bank account and transferred Grandma's savings to it. I paid off the debt I'd accumulated from student loans and extra classes. I applied for a study abroad program I'd never dared to consider before. I even registered for a digital art mentorship I'd dreamed of for years. I didn't ask for their permission. I didn't even tell them. But they found out eventually, because when I started packing my room a week later, the confrontation finally exploded. You're just going to leave? My mom snapped. Blocking my doorway. After everything we've done for you? I laughed. Actually laughed. Everything you've done for me? Or everything Grandma did that you stole from me? Dad stood in the hall, red-faced but speechless. You lived off money meant for me, I continued, my voice rising, years of resentment bubbling over. You fed Nathan's lifestyle, his failures, his toys, and told me to accept the scraps. You mocked me, humiliated me, and then watched while I broke myself working jobs to pay for things you were already funded for. Mom looked like she might cry, but I had no sympathy left. This isn't abandonment, I said coldly. It's liberation. I walked out of that house with 2 bags, my sketchbook, and a bank account Grandma helped protect from people who were supposed to protect me. And I didn't look back. 6 months later, I was sitting in a sunlit cafe in Florence, Italy, sipping espresso and sketching a small church tower nestled among cobblestone streets. My program had accepted me. My art was thriving. I was doing freelance work online and had my first gallery exhibit lined up for spring. Every so often, I'd receive a letter from Grandma, still in her pale blue envelopes, filled with encouragement, updates, and gentle reminders to eat well and rest. Life was peaceful. Until one day it began. First they tried subtlety. An email came from Mom. The subject line was softer this time. Hope you're doing well, sweetheart. I didn't even open it. But a week later, my cousin Jenna, the only relative from my dad's side who'd stayed somewhat neutral, texted me, "Hey. Your mom called. Said she couldn't reach you and that it was an emergency. Everything okay?" Emergency? I didn't fall for it. But curiosity got the better of me, and I finally opened Mom's message. It started warm. Too warm. "Ashley, I'm so proud of the woman you've become. I always knew you had this strength in you." Yeah, right. And then, buried a few paragraphs in, "We're in a really tight spot right now. Nathan's trying to get his life back on track, and we've had a few unexpected bills. We don't expect much, just a little help from our daughter while we get things sorted. Family supports each other, right?" There it was. The guilt grenade. The manipulation, dressed in compliments. They didn't need much. Just a little help. Just the daughter they called a burden for years. I didn't respond. So they escalated. A week later, Dad called from a different number. When I answered, confused, his voice jumped in before I could hang up. "Ashley, wait, just hear me out. Your mom's in tears every night. We're struggling to even buy groceries." I stayed silent. He took that as permission to continue. "You're in Italy, living your dream, can't you help your family a little? Your brother's really trying. He's had a hard time." I laughed bitterly. Had a hard time? I wanted to scream through the phone. "You had every chance to help me," I said coldly. "But you gave everything to Nathan. Don't come crawling now that your golden child turned out to be tarnished." He tried to guilt me further. "We're still your parents." "No," I said. "You were his parents." I raised myself. I hung up. And I blocked the number. But they didn't stop. They tried messaging me through extended family, even through Grandma, who, to her credit, was livid when she found out. "They never asked about you before," she fumed. "Now they remember you exist when their prince can't pay his phone bill?" I learned from cousins that they even started a GoFundMe, claiming they were abandoned by their daughter after sacrificing everything for her education. Sacrificed? I nearly broke my keyboard typing a report to the platform with proof of their fraud, screenshots, Grandma's emails, bank statements. The campaign was taken down within 24 hours. But the final straw came when I received a message. From Nathan. "Yo, I don't know what beef you have with Mom and Dad, but you're kinda messed up leaving them to struggle. You always had a chip on your shoulder." I stared at the message, numb. Then I typed only one sentence in response: "That chip was carved by your silver spoon." And then I blocked him too. They tried everything: guilt, shame, lies, even public pity. But I didn't budge. I had spent too long clawing out of their shadow. I wasn't going back to being a second-class citizen in my own life. I didn't need revenge. My peace was revenge enough. Every silence I gave them, every email I ignored, every unbothered smile I wore in my quiet European apartment, that was louder than any scream. They had made their bed. Now they were finally being forced to lie in it, without my help, without my money, and most importantly without me.